one of the oldest newspapers in Canada is making history. On this high-tech Goss community press, rolling out print at a mesmerizing rate of 317 copies per minute, the Ukrainian Voice Weekly is printing its 90th anniversary issue. With the exception of 2 printing bans imposed in 1918 and 1919, this translates into 4,670 consecutive issues for this bilingual publication. On March 16, 1910, the first issue of Ukrainian Voice, or Ukrainsky Holos, as it is commonly known, was carefully lifted off a small platen press located in the home of Wsiaki in North End, Winnipeg. Its office was 292 Selkirk Avenue. It had taken weeks for Vasil Kudryk, its first editor, and Wsiaki, owner of the press, to meticulously set the type by hand for the new 8-page newspaper. Taras Verley was the manager. Krat never worked for the Ukrainian Voice, but he printed its first 2 issues. By today's standards, it was hardly an efficient method of presenting current news. Nevertheless, it was a thrilling beginning for Kudryk, the 30-year-old schoolteacher from western Ukraine. But what drove these adventurous men to start a newspaper in a new land where others had already failed? Between 1896 to 1905, the Honorable Clifford Sifton, Federal Minister of the Interior and former cabinet member in the Manitoba government, was promoting land settlement in Western Canada. He believed that Ukrainian peasants would make ideal settlers on the Canadian prairies and rigorously defended Canada's immigration policies. Also of key importance to Ukrainian immigration to Canada was Dr. Osip Olascu, a noted Ukrainian agronomist who had toured Canada in 1895. Many regarded Olascu as the Ukrainian Moses. In Ukraine, a man who owned 13 acres was considered a rich man. So when the exaggerated word reached the peasants that in Canada 160 acres of the richest land on earth could be had for free, the unbelievable news spread rapidly throughout the regions of Halichina, also known as Galicia, and Bukovina in western Ukraine. The floodgates were opened, and immigrants began arriving in Canada on a scale that provoked angry and frightened reactions among many Canadians. Racism ignited. Among the British, particularly, racist slurs were common. Only the more charitable of them referred to Ukrainians as Sifton's pets, or peasants in sheepskin coats.
Between you and me, if Sir Clifford keeps on bringing that scum into this country...
And they're willing to work for lower wages than we are?
Then I fear things are going very badly.
Oh, very badly indeed.
On the westbound trains, they carried a few belongings, some seeds for planting, and their religious faith. The knowledge and traditions of their forefathers were often their most important possessions. Winnipeg was considered the gateway to the West. After the immigrants disembarked at the CPR station, they walked over to the nearby Emigration building, where they registered and selected their destination points. But around every turn, unscrupulous real estate sharks were waiting to take advantage of unsuspecting newcomers. A favorite trick was to sell the same piece of land to different people for cash up front. Kudryk and his family had emigrated to Canada in 1903 and settled in Tolstoy, Manitoba. Verley emigrated that same year. While the first wave of Ukrainian immigration was gaining momentum, upwards of 31,000 Ukrainians were now living in Canada, and thousands more were on the way. Many Ukrainian immigrants settled in colonies scattered across Western Canada. Few got the choice land they had read or heard about. The first Ukrainian immigrants arrived without any intellectual or religious leadership. Mostly Ukrainian Catholic, with some Ukrainian Orthodox, they were starved for spiritual guidance. Some built churches even before there were any priests to celebrate in them. They quickly fell prey to the Protestants, Anglicans, Methodists, Presbyterians, Russian Orthodox, French Catholics, and a fanatical monk from Russia and self-proclaimed bishop named Seraphim, all eager to proselytize the wandering souls. Seraphim, also known as Stefan Ustvolsky, arrived in Winnipeg in 1903 at the request of a group of early Ukrainian Canadian community leaders to head the Winnipeg-based Synodal All-Russian Patriarchal Orthodox Church. Commonly called the Seraphimite Church, it quickly gained a substantial following among the immigrant Ukrainian population. Seraphim built a church which derisively became known as the Tin Can Cathedral. His indiscretions, however, soon raised doubts about his credibility, and the Church Synod persuaded him to return to Russia to seek approbation from the Holy Synod. In Western Canada, Ukrainian settlers found a limited bilingual public education system. As a result, schools were built, and the children who could be spared from farm work frequently walked several miles, no matter what the conditions, to the single classroom schools. In 1905, due to an acute shortage of Ukrainian-speaking teachers, the Ruthenian Training School opened in Winnipeg. 2 years later, it transferred to Brandon, Manitoba. The year 1907 marked the formation of a Ukrainian Teachers Association and the beginning of Ukrainian nationalist and socialist groups in Canada. The first Ukrainian Teachers Convention was held in Winnipeg in June of the same year. 38 teachers were in attendance. It was at this gathering that Vasil Kudryk, Yaroslav Arsenich, Taras Fedley, who taught at the Ruthenian Training School, and a handful of other progressive men resolved to cut their ties with socialist thinking and to create a national Ukrainian newspaper which would not be associated with any religious or political orientations. Fedley and his followers believed that Ukrainian national identity and pride must take precedence over international working-class solidarity. They vowed to print a newspaper which aspired to high moral and literary standards and which offered guidance to Ukrainians. They called it the Ukrainian Voice, named after a newspaper published by radicals in Western Ukraine. Since Ukrainians were still generally called Ruthenians in their homeland and in Canada, it was a bold first step in reclaiming their Ukrainian identity.